The wind whipped through the quiet town, carrying the faint scent of pine and winter frost. Leela's boots crunched against the frozen path as she made her way toward the small market at the edge of town. She always took the long route, a habit born from the desire to have a few moments to herself before the day's chores consumed her. Then she saw him, a man leaning casually against the weathered railing of the old bakery, his dark coat fluttering in the breeze. Something about him made the air shift, the kind of presence that made you aware of your own heartbeat, even when you didn't want to notice. His eyes, a piercing gray that seemed to hold secrets, caught hers for just a heartbeat before he turned away. Leela shook her head, muttering to herself, "Get a grip, Leela. It's just some stranger." But it wasn't just a stranger. There was something magnetic, almost predatory, in the way he moved, a grace that felt both dangerous and familiar, though she didn't understand why. "Watch it," he called suddenly as a cartwheel nearly grazed her ankle. His voice was smooth, confident, but underneath there was a sharp edge, a warning disguised as politeness. I'm fine." She stammered, flustered by both the close call and the way his gaze seemed to strip her bare, reading something she had never let anyone see. He gave a small, almost imperceptible smirk, and then the moment was gone. The gray eyes turned elsewhere, but Leela's mind refused to let go. Who is he? She whispered to herself, tension lingering in her chest. She had felt his eyes on her, had felt the brush of something intangible, a pull she couldn't explain. Her pulse quickened as she walked past, careful not to glance back. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Later that day, she found herself at the edge of the woods, gathering herbs for her mother's remedies, when a shadow fell across the trail. Her breath hitched. There he was again, standing as though he'd appeared from nowhere, the same gray eyes, the same mysterious smile, and yet something different now, an air of alertness, of danger barely restrained. "You wander too close," he said softly, but not unkindly. "These woods, they're not safe for someone who doesn't know their boundaries. I can handle myself." Leela shot back, a little defensively, though she couldn't hide the rapid heartbeat betraying her words. His eyes softened just slightly, and a subtle smirk tugged at his lips. "I hope so," he murmured, and then he was gone before she could ask another question, leaving only the faintest echo of his presence behind. Layla's chest burned with curiosity, with confusion. Who was he, and why did it feel like he was already part of her world, even if she couldn't see how? The market bells rang in the distance, pulling her back to the present, but the stranger's shadow lingered in her mind. She didn't know it yet, but this encounter, this inexplicable attraction, was the first thread tying her to a destiny she could never have imagined. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet, she felt it deep in her bones. Her life was about to change. The mysterious stranger vanishes, but the pull between them is undeniable, a slow, burning tension that promises danger, intrigue, and something far more primal. The morning fog had barely lifted when Leela found herself walking the same path through the woods. Her basket of herbs swung loosely at her side, and every so often, her eyes flicked toward the shadows between the trees. She couldn't explain why, but she had the feeling she might see him again, the mysterious man who had appeared yesterday like a wraith. And then she did. A sudden rustle from the underbrush made her jump, and before she could react, a branch snapped underfoot. She stumbled, sending her basket tumbling to the ground. Herbs rolled in every direction, and panic fluttered in her chest. "I've got you," a voice said, low and urgent. Her breath caught. There he was, the stranger, stepping from the shadows with a speed that was almost impossible. He caught her by the waist in one fluid motion, steadying her. Her chest pressed against his, and for a moment the world narrowed to the heat of his body and the intensity of his gray eyes. "You all right?" His tone was gentle, but the tension coiled behind it like a predator ready to strike. I'm fine," she said, her voice trembling, not just from the stumble, but from the closeness, from the inexplicable pull she felt toward him. "You shouldn't wander alone," he murmured, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The gesture was casual, but Leela's stomach twisted at the intimacy of it. She tried to pull back to remind herself this was just a man, just a stranger, But every instinct in her body, the strange warmth of her chest, the way her pulse raced at his nearness, screamed otherwise. "You're very fast," she managed, trying to focus on something other than the way his presence made her feel like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. He chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. "And you're very perceptive. Most people don't notice much." The air around them seemed charged, and even the wind felt like it had stopped to watch. Leela's curiosity blazed. Who was this man? What was he hiding? Why did he make her feel like she was standing on the edge of something dangerous and thrilling? Before she could ask, a sudden noise, a distant howl, sharp and low, made them both tense. His eyes darted toward the trees, alert, calculating. "You should go," he said, his hand still lightly on her arm, grounding her. "Now, I can't just leave my basket," she protested, though every nerve screamed in agreement with him. "I'll help," he said simply, crouching to gather the spilled herbs. The casual offer, the ease with which he moved, made her heart clench. She realized, almost with horror, how much she wanted to linger here in his presence, despite the unease coiling around them. As they worked side by side, the sun broke through the mist, painting the woods in golden light. And for a brief moment, Leela allowed herself to imagine a world where this stranger wasn't just a shadow in her life, but something more, a presence she couldn't forget. When they finished, he handed her the last bundle of herbs, their fingers brushing. The touch lingered longer than necessary, a spark that neither of them could deny. "You're different," she murmured, not sure what she meant, but knowing it was true. "And you're curious," he replied, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Careful. Curiosity has a way of getting people into trouble." Her stomach fluttered, a mix of fear and anticipation. She didn't know it yet, but this near accident, this brief brush of intimacy, was only the beginning. The thread of destiny had been pulled, and it would not be unraveled. The distant howl hints at unseen danger, and the stranger's alert reaction raises questions about his true nature, what he's hiding, and why he's so connected to her. The next evening, the forest felt alive in a way that made Leela's skin prickle. Shadows twisted and danced under the silver glow of the rising moon, and the wind whispered through the trees as if carrying secrets meant only for those willing to listen. She clutched her basket tighter, feeling the weight of every leaf and branch around her. Her thoughts, however, weren't on the herbs this time. They were on him, the mysterious stranger whose gray eyes lingered in her mind like embers she couldn't extinguish. She paused by a clearing and froze. Voices, low, murmured, urgent. Someone, or several someones, were nearby, and they weren't human. Her heart thudded in her chest as she crept closer, hiding behind a thick oak. "I told you," a deep voice hissed. "He's here somewhere, the one who stole what's rightfully mine." Another voice, sharper, colder. "Be careful. If the Alpha senses you, you won't live to regret it. Move quietly." Leela's pulse raced. Alpha, she barely understood what the words meant, yet instinct screamed at her that they were dangerous, and then it clicked. The stranger, he must be connected to this somehow. A rustle nearby made her stiffen. And then, like a shadow born from the darkness itself, he stepped into view, the man she had been thinking about all day. His eyes, fierce and vigilant, scanned the trees. There was a tension to him now that hadn't been there before, a weight she hadn't realized. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, though his voice carried over the whispering wind. Not a warning, something more, something protective. I just came for the herbs," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. Yet even as she spoke, she noticed how his gaze lingered on her, sharp and assessing, like he could see through every layer of her. "You're not safe in these woods," he murmured, stepping closer. The shadows clung to him, yet he seemed to glow against them. "There are things you don't understand, things you shouldn't see." The danger in his tone was clear. Leela's curiosity, though, burned brighter than fear. She wanted to ask him everything. Who he was, why he seemed to belong to the shadows, why the world seemed different when he was near. But the instinct to survive kept her silent. Then a sudden snap of a twig echoed through the clearing, and his head whipped toward the sound. His body shifted subtly, tense and ready, like a coiled predator. He stepped in front of her, shielding her from whatever lurked in the darkness. There close, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Stay behind me. For the first time, Leela noticed the subtle changes. His posture, the way his senses seemed attuned to everything around them. She could feel the power radiating from him, restrained but undeniable. It frightened her, and yet, somehow, she couldn't tear her eyes away. When the sounds faded into silence, he finally relaxed slightly, but his gaze never left hers. Go home, he said quietly. Forget you saw anything tonight. She shook her head, confused and frustrated. I can't. I need to understand who you are. His expression softened almost imperceptibly, and for a heartbeat, vulnerability flickered in his eyes. Some truths are dangerous, he said, his voice heavy with a weight she didn't understand. Curiosity can get people killed. As he disappeared into the night, Leela remained rooted, staring after him. Her heart ached with questions she wasn't ready to answer. And yet, deep down, she knew this encounter had pulled her further into a world she couldn't escape. A world filled with shadows, danger, and secrets that were only beginning to reveal themselves. The stranger's true nature remains hidden, but the mention of an alpha and the protective stance he takes foreshadows danger and the hidden power he conceals. Leela is drawn deeper into a mystery that could cost her everything. The forest was quieter the next morning, the sun casting soft beams through the bare winter branches. Leela moved carefully along the familiar path, her basket swinging at her side, but her mind was elsewhere. The memory of him, of the way he had shielded her the night before, haunted her. She couldn't shake the feeling that the woods themselves had changed, that the air was charged with something she didn't yet understand. And then she saw him again. He was crouched by the edge of a stream, seemingly examining the water, but when he noticed her, his gray eyes lifted, locking onto hers. There was no surprise, no alarm, only recognition. And in that recognition, a thread of something unspoken passed between them. You shouldn't be wandering here alone, he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, carried over the gentle flow of the stream. I know, she replied, though she hadn't planned on admitting it. I just needed a moment. He straightened, moving closer, the forest shadows shifting around him like a cloak. A moment of peace. He asked, his tone teasing but edged with something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. Maybe, she admitted, meeting his gaze, there was a pull between them, magnetic, and she couldn't deny it any longer. The attraction that had simmered beneath the surface of their encounters was no longer subtle. It was raw, undeniable. He tilted his head, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. You're different from anyone I've ever met, he said quietly. Curious, brave, reckless perhaps. Her lips twitched in a reluctant smile. I suppose that makes two of us. For a moment silence fell, filled only by the babbling of the stream and the distant rustle of leaves. And then, almost imperceptibly, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Leela, he murmured, his voice low and hesitant, there's something about you, something I can't ignore. Her breath hitched. The name on his lips felt like a spark against dry kindling, igniting a warmth that was both frightening and exhilarating. I feel it too, she admitted before she could stop herself, and instantly regretted it. He took a step closer, close enough that the air between them seemed to sizzle. You don't know what this means, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but I can't stay away. Her chest tightened, a mixture of fear and longing twisting inside her. There was an intimacy to his words, a promise hidden beneath the warning, and for the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man behind the mystery, the one who wasn't just a stranger, but someone connected to her in ways she didn't yet understand. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken truths and desires neither dared to voice. Then, as if the forest itself had decided to intervene, a sudden rustle in the underbrush broke the spell. Both of them tensed, instinct and curiosity warring within them. He stepped back slightly, but his gaze never left hers. Be careful, he said, his voice edged with concern. You're stepping into a world you don't understand, and I can't always protect you. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "I don't care," she whispered, though even as she said it, she knew the risk she was taking, risking not just her safety, but her heart. And in that silent exchange, in the shared brush of hands and locked gazes, a connection was forged. A bond neither could name yet, but one that would pull them together through danger, deception, and the secrets that were only beginning to emerge. The brief moment of intimacy is interrupted by an unseen threat, foreshadowing the danger that continues to stalk them. Leela and the stranger are drawn closer, but the forest and his hidden identity still holds mysteries she cannot yet grasp. The days that followed were a blur of ordinary tasks and quiet unease. Leela couldn't focus, her mind constantly returning to the stranger, the way his presence lingered like a shadow she couldn't escape. She tried to tell herself it was curiosity, fascination, perhaps even infatuation. But deep down, she knew it was something more, something primal she didn't yet understand. It was late afternoon when the first real sign of danger arrived. She had just left the town square, carrying a basket of supplies, when a sudden commotion erupted behind her. Shouts, a clatter of hooves, and a shadow moving faster than any human should. Her pulse spiked. Before she could react, a figure stepped in front of her, blocking the threat with a precision that made her heart catch. Gray eyes, those same eyes that haunted her dreams, met hers, sharp and alert. He was ready for anything, every muscle coiled as if waiting for the world to attack. "You're safe," he said, though his voice held an edge of warning. "Stay behind me." Leela froze, unsure whether to obey or flee. The figure advancing toward them was clearly not human. Even in the fading light, she could see the unnatural grace, the glint of teeth, the way the shadows seemed to cling unnaturally to the edges of its form. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed at the creature. His words carried authority, commanding, almost otherworldly, and then in a blur he moved, faster than she could track, faster than the eye could follow. In an instant, the threat was gone, dispatched with a ferocity that left her breathless and trembling. When he returned to her side, his chest heaving just slightly, he offered her a hand, steady and protective. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine," she whispered, though her hands shook from adrenaline. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the stranger she had known only as curious, teasing, and strangely magnetic, with the lethal force he had just displayed. "You're in danger," he said simply, his eyes darkening, "and I can't always be there to protect you." "I don't care," she blurted and immediately regretted the defiance, but she couldn't stop the truth. A part of her wanted to be near him, even with the threat, even with the fear. She wanted to understand him, to know why her heart raced at his nearness and why the world felt both thrilling and terrifying when he was around. His gaze softened, but only for a heartbeat. "Curiosity is dangerous," he murmured. "Especially for someone like you." Leela's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean, someone like me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, the faintest brush of his shoulder against her sending a jolt through her. "There are forces in this world you don't understand," he said finally, his tone low, almost confessional. "Forces that will come for you if they know where to find you." A shiver ran down her spine. She wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but even as her curiosity flared, the forest seemed to close in around them. The shadows stretched unnaturally, and a distant howl echoed through the trees, reminding her that the danger wasn't over. "You should go home," he said, his hand lightly resting on the small of her back as he guided her toward the path, "and stay alert. Trust no one." She obeyed, though reluctantly, her mind spinning with questions. Who or what was after her, and why did it feel like every brush of his hand, every word, was binding her closer to him, to the world he kept so carefully hidden? As the moon rose and the forest darkened, Leela felt it in her bones. Her life had irrevocably changed. Danger had arrived, yes, but so had something else, something unspoken, something inevitable. The pull she felt toward him, the slow burning fire in her chest, was no longer just a fleeting attraction. It was destiny, wrapped in shadows and secrecy, waiting to claim her. The stranger's protective instincts and mysterious power hint at a hidden, dangerous world. Leela is increasingly drawn into his secret life, unaware of the forces closing in. and unaware that her fate is entwined with his in ways she can't yet comprehend. The wind had turned colder that night, slicing through the town with a biting insistence. Leela's thoughts were a storm of confusion, curiosity, and a longing she refused to fully admit. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the stranger whose presence had become an ache she carried in her chest. She had followed him once again, drawn by some invisible thread she didn't understand. The moon hung low and silver over the woods, and shadows stretched unnaturally, dancing along the path as though alive. Her pulse raced both from the cold and the anticipation of what she might find. Then she saw him standing at the edge of a clearing, but he wasn't alone. A pack of shifters, all muscular and dangerous, had gathered, their eyes glinting in the moonlight. And then she heard the words that shattered everything she thought she knew. "You've found her scent." One growled, low and warning. "She's yours by right, isn't she?" His eyes, the piercing gray she had been drawn to, softened, but only for a moment, before hardening into the unmistakable authority of an alpha. "Yes," he said, voice low, commanding, resonant. "She is my mate." Leela froze, heart pounding, breath catching. The words hit her like a physical blow. Mate, what did that even mean? Why hadn't he told her? Why had he hidden this from her? "Your scent. It's hers," he continued, moving slightly closer to her unseen position. "I've known from the moment I saw you." Her chest tightened. Shock, confusion, and a flicker of anger surged within her. All the closeness, all the tension, all the subtle touches. It had been real. And yet it had been a lie. He had hidden everything. Then, as if sensing her presence, his gaze swept the clearing, locking onto the shadows at its edge. And for the first time, she realized he could see her. His eyes softened almost desperately. "Leela, it's not what you think." She stepped forward, trembling, her voice barely a whisper. "Then tell me. Why didn't you tell me? Why lie?" He took a cautious step toward her, the moonlight glinting off the sharp angles of his face. "I had to protect you. The world you see. It's only part of the truth. There are forces hunting me, hunting you. If they knew you were mine, I couldn't risk your life." Her anger flared. "And what about my heart? What about trust? You treated me like I didn't matter." He flinched slightly at her words, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes was like a knife to her chest. "Every look, every word, every moment I spent with you. It was real, you have to believe that." Leela's mind reeled. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide from the truth that threatened to overwhelm her. And yet, somewhere deep in the chaos of her emotions, a flicker of recognition stirred. A pull undeniable, irrevocable. "You're my mate," he whispered, the words carrying weight, certainty, and longing all at once. "I didn't choose it, Leela, but it's the truth, and I've been waiting for you to realize it too." She felt tears prick at her eyes, not just from shock, but from the flood of emotions she couldn't contain. Anger, fear, longing, and something deeper, something primal. The pull she had felt since their first meeting, the magnetic, inexplicable attraction, was not just desire. It was destiny. Her voice shook, barely audible. All this time you were lying to me. I was protecting you," he said firmly, stepping closer. "And now I need you to trust me, not because of words, but because of what I am, what we are." The forest seemed to hold its breath as they stood there, the moonlight draping them both in silver. For the first time, Leela saw not just the stranger, but the man behind the shadows, the protector, the alpha, the mate she hadn't yet known she was destined to claim. And in that moment, everything changed. Leela knows the truth. He is her fated mate, but the revelation comes with a surge of betrayal and shock. The tension between trust, destiny, and danger escalates, setting the stage for emotional conflict and reconciliation. Leela's hands trembled as she clutched the fabric of her cloak, the cool night air doing little to soothe the fire coursing through her veins. Every word he had spoken, every glance, every hidden truth, pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. She felt betrayed, used even, though a part of her longed to believe him. "You lied to me," she said finally, voice trembling with a mix of fury and hurt. "Every moment. You knew we were fated, and I did it to protect you." He interrupted, stepping closer, eyes blazing, but with an unmistakable vulnerability beneath the fierce alpha exterior. You have to believe me, I never wanted to hurt you, but you did, she snapped, stepping back. All those little gestures, the teasing, the moments we shared, they weren't just lies to you. He flinched at the accusation, his jaw tightening. They were real, every moment was real, the attraction, the connection. It's stronger than anything I've ever felt. You have to understand that I was trying to keep you safe from everyone and everything that would hurt you. Her heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to fall into his arms, to let herself be consumed by the undeniable pull she felt for him. But anger and fear held her back. Safe, you call this safe, hiding the truth from me, protecting me by lying. How is that safe? He took a step toward her again, slower this time, careful not to overwhelm. I had no choice. I couldn't tell you, not until I was sure I could keep you alive. Leela's eyes filled with tears, a mix of anger, confusion, and longing. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw herself into his arms, and yet she couldn't. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that the wrong step could shatter everything between them. You don't get to decide for me, she whispered, voice breaking. I should have had the choice to know, to decide to trust you. His expression softened, a shadow of regret crossing his features. I know, he said quietly, and I'll spend whatever it takes proving that you can trust me. If you'll let me. She wanted to believe him. Every instinct screamed that this was the man she had been drawn to, the man whose presence filled her chest with a fire she couldn't explain. But trust wasn't given lightly, not after lies, not after secrets that could have cost her everything. A sudden sound in the distance, branches snapping underfoot, a low growl, made them both tense. The danger that had always lurked in the shadows was still very real, still very close. He glanced at her, protective, vigilant, and the old pull returned with a force that stole her breath. I need time, she said finally, stepping back. I don't know if I can forgive this. I need to think. He nodded, though his eyes betrayed his pain. Take all the time you need, he said softly, but know this. No matter what you feel right now, I will never let anyone hurt you, not ever, and you are mine whether you believe it yet or not. Leela turned and walked away, the moonlight casting long shadows across the forest path. Every step felt heavier than the last, her mind spinning with anger, fear, and undeniable longing. She wanted to hate him, to push him away, but a part of her, the part that had been drawn to him from the very first encounter, could not. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that the bond between them, the pull, the connection, the truth of their fated mate bond, was only growing stronger. Whether she was ready or not, their destinies were entwined. The night was still, but Leela could feel the storm of emotions raging between them, and she knew the coming days would test everything she believed about love, trust, and destiny. Leela walks away, unsure if she can forgive him. The tension between their fated bond and shattered trust intensifies, setting the stage for emotional reconciliation and looming external threats. The morning sun spilled across the forest, filtering through frost, covered branches and casting a pale, ethereal glow on the path ahead. Leela moved slowly, her mind still tangled in the chaos of last night. Anger, hurt, longing. They all wrestled within her, refusing to yield, and yet, despite everything, a part of her ached for him, for the man behind the shadows, for the stranger whose presence had become a part of her heartbeat. She found him waiting at the edge of the clearing, his posture tense but controlled. The gray eyes that had haunted her dreams softened when they met hers. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the quiet rustle of leaves in the wind. I didn't expect you, she said softly, unsure if she wanted to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. I couldn't stay away, he replied, taking a careful step closer. Not when you're in danger, not when. This is between us. His words carried a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, a raw honesty that tugged at her chest. Leela hesitated, feeling the pull between them, the undeniable connection that refused to be denied. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted, her voice trembling. Not yet. He nodded slowly, pain flickering across his features. I understand, and I'll wait. I'll prove it to you in every way I can, but I need you to know one thing. Nothing I've done, nothing I've said was ever meant to hurt you." Her breath caught, the words stirring something deep within her. For the first time, she allowed herself to see the truth in his eyes, to feel the sincerity, the desperation, the longing that mirrored her own. "You really believe I'm your mate?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, though the words carried the weight of a lifetime. "I don't just believe it," he said, stepping closer so the space between them thinned. "I know. From the moment I saw you, I felt it. The pull, the connection. It's unbreakable, Leela. You are mine as much as I am yours." Her chest tightened at his words. Every instinct screamed both warning and desire, and she realized that the anger she had clung to was fading, replaced by something more complex, more profound. A mixture of fear and longing, trust yet to be earned but impossible to deny. "I want to understand," she said finally, taking a hesitant step forward. "I want to know everything, about you, about us, but you have to promise, no more lies." He extended his hand, a silent offering of reconciliation and trust. "I promise no more lies, only truth, from this moment on." She placed her hand in his, the contact electric, grounding and igniting all at once. The forest around them seemed to shift, the shadows receding as if recognizing the bond forming in plain sight. For hours they spoke about his life, his secrets, the dangers that surrounded them, and the connection that had drawn them together from the start. With every word, Leela felt the storm in her chest calm slightly, replaced by a fragile but undeniable trust. By the time the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the clearing, the unspoken tension between them had softened into something richer, an understanding, a tentative alliance, a spark of something that could become love. Yet even as they stood together, connected by both fate and choice, the forest reminded them that danger was never far. A distant howl carried across the trees, sharp and low, a reminder that the world they were stepping into was unpredictable and the forces hunting him, and now her, were still very real. Still, for the first time, Leela allowed herself a glimmer of hope. She could face the uncertainty, the danger, and even the lingering mistrust, because for the first time they were facing it together. Emotional reconciliation begins, but the distant howl reminds them that external danger looms. Their bond grows stronger, yet the threats surrounding them are far from over, keeping tension high. The forest was alive with tension, the crisp night air carrying the distant sounds of movement. Footsteps, low growls, and the occasional rustle of leaves. Leela's heart pounded in her chest as she followed him deeper into the woods, her senses alert to every shadow, every flicker of motion. The world she had known was shrinking, replaced by a dangerous reality she still didn't fully understand. "You need to stay close," he murmured, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was grounding, protective, but it carried an unspoken warning. "They're watching us, the other packs. They won't tolerate this." Leela's eyes widened. "Other packs?" He didn't answer immediately, instead scanning the trees with predatory precision. "There are rival alphas who see me as a threat, and now, you are part of that threat." Her stomach dropped. "Me, why me? You're my mate," he said simply, his gray eyes locked on hers. "And they will try to use you to control me, to break what I've waited for my entire life." The words sent a chill through her, and she realized the depth of the danger she had stepped into. It wasn't just personal. It was political, primal, and potentially deadly. She had been drawn into a world of wolves, alphas, and power struggles she hadn't even imagined. A sudden crack of a branch made her flinch, and he immediately positioned himself between her and the unseen threat. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Two figures emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing, their presence radiating power and menace. Leela could feel the tension in the air as the rival alphas sized them up, their eyes flicking between her and him. "You've been hiding her," one of them growled, voice low and dangerous. "Thought you could keep your mate a secret. That won't work, Alpha." "She's not a secret," he replied, his voice calm but carrying authority that made even the rival alphas pause. "And no one touches her." The standoff crackled with energy, and Leela felt her chest tighten, caught between fear and awe. She had never imagined a man, any man, could inspire such raw authority, such power. And yet here he was, standing firm, every muscle coiled, every instinct ready. One of the rival alphas stepped forward, a mocking smile on his face. "We'll see about that. She's leverage. You can't protect her forever." Without warning, he lunged forward, his movements faster than Leela could follow. The rival staggered, caught off guard by his sheer speed and precision. He returned to her side moments later, eyes blazing with both warning and reassurance. "You're mine," he said, his tone fierce, "and anyone who thinks otherwise will pay the price." Leela's breath caught. She wanted to step forward, to reach for him, but instinct told her to stay back. She realized in that moment just how dangerous their world was, and how fiercely he would fight for her. "You have to trust me," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not just for us, but for your life. They'll stop at nothing." Her pulse raced, not just from fear, but from the undeniable pull she felt. Trusting him felt like both the safest and most dangerous thing she could do. But the fire between them had grown too strong to ignore. The rival alphas retreated, for now, leaving only the lingering threat of their return. And as the forest settled into an uneasy silence, Leela realized that danger, passion, and destiny were all intertwined, and that there was no turning back. The rival alphas retreat, but their threat remains. Leela fully realizes that her life is now inseparable from his world, increasing tension and stakes for both their safety and their bond. The moon hung high over the forest, casting silver light on frost, covered branches and the clearing where they stood. Leela's breath caught in her chest as she took in the sight of him, strong, fierce, and unyielding, yet somehow vulnerable when he looked at her. The danger from rival alphas had not fully passed, but for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. "You belong with me," he said, his voice low and commanding, carrying the weight of centuries of instincts, authority, and unspoken longing. Not because of force, but because it's fate, because no one, nothing can take what is ours. Her chest ached at the certainty in his eyes, the pull she had felt since their first meeting. The undeniable bond that had drawn her into his world was no longer just a whisper or spark. It roared through her veins like wildfire, fierce, consuming, inevitable. I don't know if I can," she whispered, torn between fear and desire. "There's so much danger, so much I don't understand." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet grounding. "I'll face it all," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch igniting a heat that had nothing to do with the cold. "Every threat, every shadow. As long as you are by my side. You are my mate, Leela, and I claim you here now in front of the world if I must." Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. The words, the promise, the fire in his eyes. Everything converged into a force she could not resist. With trembling hands, she reached for him, letting herself be drawn into the certainty of their bond. Their lips met in a kiss that was both fierce and tender, a collision of longing and destiny. It was a kiss that spoke of trust, of passion, of promises made without words. The world fell away, the rival alphas, the dangers, the fear, and only the two of them remained, bound by fate, by fire, and by the undeniable truth of their connection. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, he held her close, forehead to forehead. "Together," he murmured, "always." Leela nodded, letting herself melt into him, her heart finally at peace, even as the distant howl of the forest reminded her that the world was still dangerous, but for the first time, she knew she was not alone. She had a protector, a partner, a mate, and nothing could take that from her. The night stretched around them, alive with possibilities and the promise of a future they would face side by side. She had found him, and he had claimed her, not through force, but through the undeniable pull of destiny. And in that moment, all fear melted into fire, and all doubt gave way to certainty. This was where she was meant to be. Leela accepts her fated mate bond, overcoming fear and uncertainty. Their union is passionate, definitive, and sets the stage for a lasting connection despite ongoing external threats. The forest was calm now, bathed in the gentle silver glow of the full moon. Leela stood beside him, her hand in his, feeling the steady, grounding presence of the man who had once been a stranger but was now everything. her protector, her alpha, her mate. The danger that had stalked them, that had threatened to tear them apart, seemed distant, almost like a fading memory. He looked at her, gray eyes soft and warm, full of the unspoken promises that had carried them through trials, deception, and fear. "You're mine," he said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And I'll never let anything hurt you again." She smiled, letting herself rest in the strength and certainty of him. "And you're mine," she whispered, "always." The night air was crisp but gentle, carrying the scent of pine and earth, mingling with the faint, lingering traces of wolf scent that reminded her of the world they now shared. She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart, and the undeniable connection that had drawn them together from the very beginning. In the distance, the howl of a lone wolf echoed, not as a threat but as a song of acknowledgement. Their pack, their family, had accepted them both, and the balance of the forest seemed restored. The dangers that had once loomed over them would always exist, but now they faced them together, bound by destiny, strength, and unbreakable trust. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close beneath the moonlight. "No more secrets," he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. "No more lies, just us, together." Leela closed her eyes, letting the weight of fear, confusion, and doubt fall away. She felt the pull of their bond in every fiber of her being, steady, unwavering, and infinite. For the first time, she truly believed in their fate, in their connection, in the love that had grown through danger, deception, and passion. As they stood there, the moon casting a luminous glow over the forest, Leela knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would face every threat, every shadow, every challenge, because their bond was stronger than anything that could try to tear them apart. And under the watchful glow of the moon, with the forest as their witness, they allowed themselves to simply be mate to mate, soul to soul, heart to heart. The world was still wild, still unpredictable, but they were together. And that was more than enough.